Hello and welcome. Welcome to Libraries Week at Kingston Library. This week we're going to be sharing with you, amongst other things, a series of videos and posts all about what your local librarians choose to read, why we choose to read particular books, what we think of them, and giving them a 10 out of 10 stamp rating. We're going to be talking about all the books we've read this year so far, and at the end of the week you will have a definitive ranking of the best books that your Kingston librarians have read this year from our own ratings, and we'll be able to tell you where you can find those books, whether you'll be able to reserve them or whether or not you'll be able to read them on our ebook or audiobook apps. I'm Fran, and I'm going to be bringing you the 10 books / series that I have been reading this year so far. It's been a good year for reading. We've had lots of time to get our teeth into some books that we've not been able to have the time to read in the past, maybe, or perhaps you're the opposite and you've been reading less. Maybe you're used to reading on the commute, or you know, reading during your lunch break at work and other things, and being at home perhaps it's been much busier than normal. But if you're me, you've had a little bit more time to read than normal, which is nice. So I'm going to be kicking off my books that I read this year so far. The very first books I read this year were the Discovery of Witches series by Deborah Harkness, and then also the spin-off book which is called Time's Convert. The Discovery of Witches series is a series that has been going through the rounds of the Kingston librarians because a lot of us love a good fantasy book, as you may know, and we definitely love this series in particular. I don't know if you can hear it, but there is a bird in the tree outside my window, so don't be alarmed. It's having a good old chat out there. Anyway. Yes, the Discovery of Witches series, if you don't really know what it's about, don't sort of get too put off if you're not really into fantasy. It's definitely in a more realistic sense. The main character is a lady named Diana Bishop, who is a witch, and her whole life has suppressed her witch powers because witches killed her parents, and she's grown up without them because of other witches, so she's suppressed her witch powers. And this is in a world where witches obviously coexist along with vampires and demons, and humans are, as usual, unaware. The plot of the story kicks off when she finds a magical book in the Bodleian Library at Oxford, Ashmole 782, and she finds that the book is bewitched, and she can't, and the words from the book kind of magically move around the pages and onto her skin and things like that. She returns the book to the library stacks only to find that it is missing the next day. She is joined by a vampire named Matthew, who is also looking for this book, and dark forces kind of gather together to try and get the book, as they believe that Diana has it, and Diana wants to try and find out the mystery of what this book is all about, why these people want it so much, and what it means. And there's a very nice love story along the way as well. You may have caught it on Sky. I think there's a Sky series as well. Oh, there's a definite bird brawl going on out there. Anyway. So yes, there's a lot of magic, a lot of darkness, a lot of mysticism. It's a really well written series because you do, even though they're witches and vampires, you do feel that the characters are really natural and human. They're really interesting to follow along with, and you really care about their development, and it's just a really great series to get through, and I really enjoyed it. There's the standalone book, which is called Time's Convert, takes place after the series is finished, and is about another couple of characters who are sort of in the background of the main trilogy, named Marcus, and I don't remember the other character's name. But that's a really good one too. It kind of goes through the whole process of becoming a vampire in this world, and is very interesting and original. but overall I'd say definitely read the main trilogy if you are interested. So I would give the Discovery of Witches series 8 out of 10 stamps, and I would give Times Convert 7 out of 10 stamps. I give it 1 less just because there isn't enough Diana and Matthew, and I don't know, I just find it more exciting. So, moving on to the next book I read. The next book I read is Vox by Christina Doucher, or Doucher, however you pronounce it, I'm not sure. It's a book that was definitely getting a lot of hype because it follows into the whole Handmaid's Tale trend of very dark dystopian books in which women are severely oppressed. It's, you know, it had a lot talking about it, and it was very, very popular when it first came out. I enjoyed it, however, I would say it definitely doesn't focus too much on the premise, and the premise is what draws you in when you read the blurb. The premise of the book is that in this sort of dystopian society, women and girls are no longer allowed to speak more than 100 words a day. They have bracelets on which can obviously listen to the amount of words you have, and it kind of counts down, and for every word you speak past the 100 limit you get an electric shock which gets gradually more and more severe. Women are no longer allowed to read or write or have jobs really, and things like that. Girls and boys are taught very different things at schools. And it's quite a horrible, brutal society. And the main character is a lady named Jean, who prior to this change in society was a quite accomplished scientist, and she has sons and a daughter as well, and so she has to adjust herself to this new way of life while also protecting her daughter, as her daughter's quite young, and you know, to try and show her how to grasp this new way of life, you know, not speaking more than 100 words. It's very sad and emotional when she's, you know, thinking about her children, because she can't control them in that way and tell them like this is the way life is now, because she can't justify it. But at the especially one who is getting quite older and who is definitely buying into this horrible regime, and that is at the same time emotional for another way. I'd say though the book doesn't really follow that premise very much. It kind of settles on it here and then, but the main plot of the book is actually about how Jean is called back into work because she was working on a theory of I think it's brain aneurysms, and I think the president's son, you know, is severely suffering from it, and she needs to come up with a cure. And because she was the most accomplished scientist in that field at the time, and it's more about that rather than the whole awful regime controlling women kind of thing. And I feel like it would have maybe been a bit more interesting if it tied it in a little bit more. But I wouldn't say it was a bad book. It definitely could have been maybe tied together a little bit better. The ending was quite abrupt. I think if you try and find out anything about this book, a lot of people might say that the ending is quite abrupt, and it definitely was. So I would only give this book 5 out of 10 stamps because, as I say, it was well written and did sort of punch, you know, it didn't pull any punches in the more emotional aspects of the story, but it definitely could have maybe all been put together in a more cohesive package, I think. So the next book I read is called Disobedience by Naomi Alderman. You may have seen my book review of Power by Naomi Alderman, and I will post it in the comments below. Naomi Alderman is a really great writer for women, and especially Power, which is one of her first books, you know, follows a very sort of science fiction-y way of oppressing women, and if women were to have magical powers, that would overthrow the dynamic of gender imbalance in the world. Disobedience is a very, very different story. I think it's her debut, and I read Disobedient just because I loved Power so much and I just wanted to see what her other book was like. Disobedience is about two women who live in a very Orthodox Jewish community in London, one of which is a housewife and the other one who is a woman who has left the community prior to the book starting and has come back for a funeral in the family. And it's about the relationship between these two women as they were friends when they were younger, and how time apart has kind of made one kind of feel stuck in this very strict traditional community, and another one come back to it after she's been living a more mainstream life. It definitely was a really interesting look at the Jewish community, at the very devout Orthodox community, as it's not really a group of people that you see much in books. I don't think I've ever read another book about them before. It was very respectful, very it gave a lot of details about the way of life and the church and things like that. It's very interesting. I definitely would like to read more books, maybe from the point of view of people in the Jewish community, as I do feel like they're maybe underrepresented in books. And it was a very well written story about these two women who go at it from different points of view, and also a male character as well, as he becomes the next rabbi in the community after the previous rabbi has died. It's definitely one to have a read if you're curious about that community, as Naomi Alderman is Jewish herself. So I would give Disobedience by Naomi Alderman a 6 out of 10 stamps. So do check that one out if you like. So the next book or series that I would like to talk about is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. This is a series of 8 books which I borrowed prior to lockdown from the library. The reason I borrowed this series in particular was that it was particularly recommended to me by a colleague, and I definitely wanted like a big thick fantasy series, or maybe not a fantasy series, but I just wanted a big series that was easy to read, just to fill up a few weeks of time of reading in lockdown. And my colleague recommended this series to me, so I decided to pick it up, and I thoroughly loved it. It's now in one of my maybe top 5 series of all time. I did do a book review of the Throne of Glass series, which I'll post in the comments below, but I'll give a very brief recount of the plot for you. It is an epic fantasy series, and it is for teens. However, it does get much more adult as the books go along, so I'd maybe recommend reading this if you're perhaps 18 and up. The main plot of it is, the first book at least, is about a young lady named Selena Sardothian, who is an assassin, and she is in a slave camp after she was caught, and is freed by the crown prince named Dorian. And Dorian tells her that if she competes to win a competition, she may win to become the king's champion, the king's chief assassin, chief bodyguard, that sort of thing. And if she wins and if she is the king's champion for 2 years, she is then free. And as she was previously, condemned to, rot in this slave camp for the rest of her life, Selena accepts. And she goes back to the palace and to compete in this tournament competition. It definitely feels a bit Hunger Gamesy. It's not really like a fight to the death. It is more like a tournament kind of thing, but it does have a very sort of dark feeling, like that the people running this country aren't good people, and Selena struggles with that, as she has reasons to really despise this particular royal family, as she is from another country, you know, are separate from the one in which this takes place. However, Dorian, she begins to, you know, get to know and finds that he's not a bad person, and so she has to challenge her own beliefs, and, you know, whether she even wants to serve the king. It's a really, really exciting series. This that I've just said is really only the plot of the very first book. There are 8 in the entire series, and the massive arc of events and plots and character development that goes through the whole series is so expansive. Selena is the main character through all 8 books. However, there is a whole host, there is a whole what's the word, I can't remember the word now, but it's a whole group of characters who, ensemble, that was the word. They're a whole ensemble of characters that come into play and have different motivations, and are they good or are they bad, and some are good characters, some are definitely bad, and some are anti-heroes, and they all have great character development throughout. It's so brilliant. There are so many great strong female characters as well. There are lots of very well written male characters as well. You just have to read the Throne of Glass series. If you like fantasy, if you like lots of action, a bit of sort of dark, grim fantasy as well, if you like good character development, do pick up this series. Yes, please. I'm going to give this series 9 out of 10 stamps. It only misses out on the 10 because of reasons I can't really discuss, as it is very spoilery, you know, things that come into play towards the end. I will say the ending of the series is great. I love it. But there are some criticisms that can be had. So I will just knock it off 1 point for that. In addition, the first couple of books in this series can be quite off-putting if you're more used to adult fantasy. They're definitely more of a teen fantasy bent, like I said, like the Hunger Games and things like that, but it definitely grows more mature as it goes along, so don't be put off. Definitely continue reading. So yes, that's the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. I love it so much. So the next book I read this year is the first book I read for our Kingston Library Digibook group, which you can still join anytime if you like to. We are currently meeting twice a month on Thursdays at 6:30 p.m. on Zoom. So just search Kingston Library Digibook group on Facebook and you can find our group, and which is where you'll find the Zoom links and book recommendations and discussions over there. So please do come and join us if you'd like to. Every month on the Digibook group we choose a different theme, and so the first book that I read was called Tales of the City by Armistead Maupin. I don't remember what the theme was, but it did fit the theme. It was a book that was recommended to me by my mum, actually, because it was a book series that she read and a TV series that she watched back in sort of the 80s and 90s. And I can definitely see why this series was very popular for the time. You know, it's very progressive for the time. It does show a community of people that weren't really represented in books at the time. You know, there's a transgender character, LGBT characters, and it does highlight sort of another perspective on sort of female desire in a way that a lot of books don't, or definitely weren't at the time. It's a very pleasant book, very easy to read. The characters feel very human and very real, and you definitely want to watch the TV series at least, or the series of books is quite massive. And yeah, I found it a really nice, light, easy to read book. It's about a woman called, I think her name's Marianne Singleton, and she goes to San Francisco, which is where she stumbles upon this amazing community of people, friends, confidants, lovers, who make her kind of see the world in a different way. And it's a lovely book. I would give it 5 out of 10 stamps, just because it didn't change my life or anything like that, but I still found it really pleasant and easy to read. I didn't see anything really wrong with it. It was just really not my thing, but I really enjoyed it anyway. I'm just gonna have a drink because I've been talking for 20 minutes at this point. Okay. So the next book I read this year was another book for our Digibook group, which I believe was a librarian recommendation. And I chose to read Miss You by Kate Eberlin. Miss You is a book that was recommended by my amazing colleague Lou, and she did a book review, which I'll post in the comments. It definitely inspired me to read this book, as it sounded similar to one of my favourite books of all time, which is called One Day by David Nichols. Miss You is about two characters named Tess and Gus, who are characters that kind of briefly almost meet in Italy right before they're both about to start university, but they don't quite have that connection. They don't quite meet, and the whole book is about their lives going forward for the next sort of 15-20 years as they kind of cross paths so many times but never quite meet. And you know through the book that they would just be perfect for each other, but they just never quite get there. It is very you want to go through these characters' lives, and you know that all their problems would be solved if they just met each other. It's a very, very emotional book at times, because apart from the whole wanting the characters to meet sort of anticipation, their lives at times can be so hard to read and emotional. It's very real. It's very highlighting the idea of, you know, life doesn't go the way you expect it to, but at the same time it's very rewarding. You definitely begin to feel for these characters very deeply, and all the people in their lives as well, because you get to know them and you see how those relationships develop and change through the years, and it's just so interesting and it's so well done, so well observed. I definitely love this book very much. I will rather let you go and watch Lou's review and then go and read it yourself. I got it as an ebook on Overdrive, so please do go and check that out. It's such a great book and it's so rewarding at the end. You'll feel very satisfied, and you know, just one of those books that stays with you for a few days after you finish reading it, so you can't really start another book until, you know, you've kind of thought about it enough and got it out of your system. So I will give Miss You by Kate Eberlin 8 out of 10 stamps, as it maybe is a slightly slow to get started, but it does pick up pace, and the further you go through the book, the more you love it. And it, you know, can be very sad at times, but that is only what's stopping it from getting 10 out of 10 stamps. It's such a really good book, so please do check that one out. So book number 7 is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. I haven't yet done a book review on this book, which I will do at some point, so I'll only be brief now. It's a book I really much enjoyed. It's a book about a woman named Rosemary who joins a spaceship crew as she is in need of a job after some family drama back home. So as you might have guessed, it takes place in a very futuristic sort of sci-fi society. Most humans now live on Mars, and Rosemary escapes onto this spaceship crew just as a way of meeting new people, making friends and starting a new life. The book has such a really great diverse crew of characters. Every member of this ship's crew you grow to care about very much. Becky Chambers has thought through all the alien species so well. They're very cleverly thought out. She's thought about sort of everything from the way they breathe and the way they eat, the way they move and how they reproduce and how they communicate, and their culture and the culture of all these amazing different species that she's invented. It's so very well done, and trying to remember all of that at times can be difficult, but as you're reading it through Rosemary's eyes, you can kind of you relate to that through her as she's trying to remember it, so she's, you know, not doing something wrong or greeting someone in a completely offensive way, or, you know, being too cuddly when a species, you know, they don't like to be touched and stuff like that. It's really really well thought out. Definitely a very harmonious book. You know, it shows you that people of all different backgrounds, different cultures can come together and live in harmony. It's really really great humour as well. Some of the characters are hilarious, and the camaraderie they all have as well is great. They're just like a little family. I will say the ending is kind of quick and abrupt, but only because afterwards I found out that it's actually a series of books, which I didn't know it was when I was reading it, so that makes more sense. I definitely will read the others in the series at some point, but for the meantime I did really enjoy this book. I'll give it 7 out of 10 stamps. So, moving on from The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, the next book I read, I don't think I have it here anymore. Oh, here it is. Yes, sorry. You may have caught me last month or 2 months ago reading The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth. It was a read-along we did, so I read every chapter for you. So that's all on our YouTube channel or here on our Facebook page. So you can go over there and listen to it all if you'd like a free audiobook of it. You can go and listen to the adventures of Mole, Rat, Badger and Mr. Toad. I did a book review as well for it, which I'll post down below. I really loved revisiting this story, as I haven't since I was a child. The characters felt very nostalgic to me, and some of the events which I'd forgotten came back to me, which was a real pleasure, and I just found it lovely. So I will give that 7 out of 10 stamps as well. So please do go and check out our read along of the book and also our book review of The Wind in the Willows. So we're back to the penultimate book that I have read this year so far, which was The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I got it as a Christmas present last year, and I still have not actually gotten around to reading it until now, until maybe a few weeks ago, and I really enjoyed it. It is a sequel to The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood as well, so if you've read that or if you've seen the series of it, this probably will tie into it quite well. I think that Margaret Atwood wrote this book, the sequel, maybe to tie into the TV series, and so the TV series can cover the events in this book as it catches up to it. So perhaps if you're reading the TV series, this might be a really good one for you. The Testaments does not feature Offred, who is the main character in The Handmaid's Tale. Instead, this book is in the point of view of 3 different characters, 3 different women who are growing up. Well, 2 of them are in the society of Gilead and 1 who isn't. It's in one of the perspectives is Aunt Lydia, who is a very villainous figure who we saw in the original Handmaid's Tale story, and it gives a lot more of her perspective, her backstory, her feelings on Gilead, her feelings on the regime. It's a very interesting take, and I like how her point of view does shine a light on some events in the past as well. There's also another character, a young lady named Agnes, who is a young lady who has grown up in Gilead, who struggles with the fact that she knows her mother was a handmaid, her biological mother was a handmaid, and her adoptive mother was a woman who, you know, essentially abused that woman. And it was very, like, her growing to realise that Gilead is not all it's cracked up to be, and, you know, trying to get through life and gradually realising that it's not fair. You don't get many options as a woman in Gilead. You're either a wife or, you know, a cook or an aunt, and it's a very interesting perspective on that. The third character is a young lady named Daisy, I believe, who is growing up in Canada. She's like a 16-year-old, I believe, at the time the book begins, and she is living with her parents in Canada, and you see the outsider's perspective on Gilead as well, and how the rest of the world views them. And her life kind of is thrown into disarray after a traumatic event. and it becomes involved in the whole story. It was really well written, as The Handmaid's Tale was, very gripping. As the book continued on and the 3 points of views begin to converge, it becomes very, very exciting. You can't put the book down. It's so, so good. I definitely recommend the Testaments, but do read or watch The Handmaid's Tale first. I would give the Testaments 8 out of 10 stamps. And yeah, please do read that one. I really loved it. Lastly, we're up to the present, with the last book I have read so far, at the time of recording this. The 10th book that actually it's the 10th series, because there are 8 books in the Throne of Glass series, but you know what I mean, is Are We All Lemmings and Snowflakes by Holly Bourne. This is a teen book. However, I'd say it is definitely beneficial for any adult who would like to read it as well. I read a Holly Bourne book last year called How Do You Like Me Now, which is her first adult book. So if you'd rather read a book for adults by this author, go ahead and read that one. It was very, very good. However, for reasons I'll explain, I'd say this is a very beneficial book for people of any age to read, as it definitely shows a perspective on people with mental illness that I don't believe I really do see in adult books at the moment, with some exceptions. The main plot of it is a young lady named Olive who suffers from a severe disorder. At the beginning of the book is in a very depressive state. She feels just very down and terrible and triggered by various things in her life. She at the beginning of the book comes very, very close to harming herself, and her parents take her to the doctor, and the doctor recommends a treatment camp that is trialing at the moment, and so she is sent to this camp for wellness for young people. And it's about Olive sort of meeting the other people at this camp, the other teenagers, all talking about their different issues. And Olive, because she's very, she's afraid of learning what her diagnosis is. She's afraid of actually knowing what mental health conditions she may have, because she doesn't want to be, labelled or, or put into a box of people in which she feels like she doesn't belong. It's very emotional book, as you're following along with Olive's mental state, and it's a very, very interesting one. You don't get a book that's quite as visceral as this. The author must go through something like this as well. It's so true to the real experience, and for that reason I do think that everybody should probably read this book, or I would say anything by Holly Bourne, really, because she's such a great writer. Her writing is so relatable, and so I definitely recommend this book. So I'd give this book 7 out of 10 stamps. And that brings us to the end of this video. Do keep tuning in to our Facebook page and YouTube channel, because we'll be bringing more videos and posts of our lists through the week of Libraries Week, and there'll be more events this week too. There'll be a tarot reading, there'll be other bits and pieces we've got going on, so please do keep tuning in. Let us know down below, have you read any of the books that I've read this year so far? What do you think of them? Do you agree with my ratings? Would you rather they be higher or lower? Do you agree with me? And I'd love to have a discussion down in the comments below. So thank you so much for watching these past 34 minutes, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you. Bye.